Hello everyone, Top Hat Waffle here once again to continue working on our Counter-Strike Global Offensive competitive level. Today we'll be working with Displacements, which allows us to have bumpy ground like dirt in our level. It also is used in the new Inferno for the nice brick effect around windows. We'll start by loading the CSGO SDK from the Tools section on Steam, and from there opening Hammer World Editor. From there, I already have the demo level that I'll be using for today. We'd be using the Metro map, but unfortunately, I can't apply everything you need to know about displacements inside that level. One quick thing that I'm going to do in Hammer is change a setting that will let Hammer perform a little bit better in more populated levels. If I go to Tools, Options, and 2D Views, I'm going to disable Draw Vertices. This will get rid of the little white boxes that are kind of plaguing my 2D views right now. For some reason, disabling that provides a massive speed increase to Hammer. We're going to turn this building into a displacement along with this area down here. Displacements have a few rules that we have to follow. The main rule is that a displacement must always have 4 sides. It cannot have less, it cannot have more. If we need more complex shapes, we must use more displacements. Displacements are pretty cheap to draw, so it's okay to use a lot of them. Let's start by turning this flat ground here into a grass displacement. I'll start by clicking Browse and then doing a search for grass. From here, I'll grab this DE Cobble Grass Alt Blend and then right-click to apply it. The first thing you may notice is that we have a dirt texture instead of a grass texture. This is because this is a blend texture and we're able to determine the alpha between 2 or more textures as we paint. When we create displacements, we want to make sure that we only create displacements from the active faces. This prevents movement glitches along with lighting issues later on down the road. To do this, we open the face edit sheet and then we left click on the face we want to turn into a displacement. If I hide everything else in my scene, you'll notice that these other faces are not selected. If I click Create under the Displacement tab, this will give us the option to turn it into a displacement. We have a few choices, Power 2, 3, and 4. You'll always want to use Power of 3 when working with displacements. So you know what the powers do. If I turn this to 4, you see we get more detail inside the displacement. The only issue with this is it requires more computational power, and for some reason, in certain cases, it will crash the game if a player dies on a Power of 4 displacement. So it's better off just to use more Power of 3s than less Power of 4s. If I want to turn this displacement back into a regular brush, I just need to select all the faces that are currently a displacement and click Destroy. This will return it to a regular world brush. If I were to have all the faces of this brush selected when I click Create, each face is turned into a displacement. We don't need these other faces, and they're just going to cause more strain. So we can delete them. If you've already created your displacement with extra faces, the easiest way to delete them all is to select the entire brush, deselect the face that you want to keep, and then click Destroy. This will remove the other faces from the displacement, leaving us with the desired effect we want. If I unhide everything else in the level, we can come over here and start to paint this displacement. There's 2 options for painting displacements. We're going to use the Paint Geometry option, as Sculpt is riddled with bugs and you have to use lots of workarounds to actually get anything useful out of it. If we click Paint Geometry, we'll get the Displacement Paint Geometry window. If we move our cursor over displacement, we'll get this sphere with a yellow line drawn on it. You'll notice it snaps to where the grid lines on the displacement meet. These are the locations where we can paint and disform this object. The distance will be set at 5 by default, and when you click, it will increment 5 units. We can set this higher to paint more units at a time, and if we right click, it will negatively apply that distance. I find it easier to paint with a low value. You can type in a decimal value here and paint at 0.5 or 0.25 or whatever. I find it much easier to get convincing looking displacements when you paint with less value at a time. We also have the radius, which will increase or decrease the size of the sphere, affecting the area that we're painting. If I paint one end of the displacement up pretty harshly, we have the smooth option. Smooth will allow us to smooth this with the rest of the displacement. If I just click a few times, you'll notice it starts to bring this down and kind of smooth it out with the rest of the object. This is very useful for when you're doing anything organic like dirt or snow or grass in your level. Grass is usually never really harshly bumpy, so this is a good way to get a convincing effect. What if we want to join more displacements into this ground? Let's turn this ramp into a displacement as well. Selecting just the top face in our face edit sheet, we'll go to the displacement tab and click create again with power of 3. We'll apply this grass material to it, and if we start to paint, you may notice that these don't equal up anymore. We have to perform what's called a sew between these two displacements. If we select both these displacements and click sew, nothing happens. This is because the displacements aren't aligned properly, so they do not know how to meet up with each other along their vertex lines. If I hide everything else in the scene so we can just focus on these for now, we need to make 2 cuts to make these displacements sew. So I'll select this big displacement here and grab the clipping tool, and I want to split this brush vertically so its vertexes line up with this one's vertexes. If we look at the vertex tool, we have these white dots at the end. These are the corner vertexes that we want to align with each other so they will sew. If I select this object as well, we can see that these vertexes are in the exact same location as each other. This is our end goal for getting displacements to sew. The only issue is that over here, these do not align. We just need to make one more cut to create another set of vertexes, and now they'll sew. Since 3 are meeting at the same point, all 3 of them need to share that same vertex location for a sew to successfully happen. If I bring the face edit sheet open again, and I select all of these, when I click sew, this gap will disappear. Up at the top of this hill, I don't want this to be grass, so this is where we need to essentially merge displacement with regular brush. It's very helpful in this situation to use the set to or raise to function of the displacement tool. This will allow us to set a static value to the verts in the displacement. In this case, the value of 1 is 1 unit above where we want to meet. I can set this to -4, and we'll paint this down so it's now underneath. The clever thing to do in most situations is to now grab a prop static, and you can grab a curve model, and just hide your shame of a seam with the model. This is what most people will do, and it works out quite well in most situations. Lastly, I just want to take the raise lower and paint this up just a little bit so it covers the sides of the building. After that, I'll just perform another sew so everything meets up. Now let's paint some color onto this object. If we're using a texture that has blend in the name, that typically means that it has 2 different textures that we can cycle through with alpha painting. If we click invert alpha, it will switch the entire texture between the 2 options. And when we click paint alpha, we get a similar UI to the paint geometry. We can choose the size of our brush. With this, I'll use 2, and I can just click and paint to add some dirt underneath. Hey, that's pretty good. Now let's turn this building to have some displacements on it to mimic the effect of Inferno. We'll start by turning this top block into a displacement that will allow us to paint some alpha on it. If we open the face edit sheet, we can select multiple faces to keep of a displacement. I don't want the top since that can't be seen, and I don't want the back for the same reason. With these 3 faces selected, I'll click create, and we have our displacement. Let's grab the plaster material from Inferno that's saved under HR_P, and I'll want to use the plaster G blend. If I just right click that on, and I'll alt wrap the faces like we learned yesterday. I'll grab paint alpha, and we can start to paint some alpha onto this, and we'll notice we'll get the brick pattern emerging. Some blend textures have additional information in the controls for them that will allow you to have patterns emerge when you paint your alpha. We'll go into this later in the texture creation video. So I'll just paint some stuff. With that all painted up, let's turn the bottom one into a displacement. This is a little more difficult due to the fact that there are windows that are going to be placed on this wall. We don't want to have our windows just shoved into the side of the displacement, since the windows recede into the model a little bit. This will result in the effect that we have here with just the window border showing. Plus, we also want to get a little bit better lighting and painting effect with the brickware around the window. This requires us to essentially cut a hole in our displacement, but we still need to follow the rules with the vertices lining up and only having a maximum and minimum of 4 sides. We'll end up using 4 displacements per window, and we need to do a little bit of vertex manipulation to do so. I'll start by hiding everything that's not these window frames and this wall. I only want to use this as a guide, as I'm going to be creating a fair amount of displacements around this. I'll just use the HR texture here, and I'll grab the block tool, and just in front of it, I'll create one brush that's going to run the side of the window in my side view here. Open the face edit sheet and create our displacement out of our needed face. Now if we go into vertex mode, I want to grab this top vertex and pull it down to the corner behind the window frame. I want to do the same to this bottom vertex. We now have this sort of weird shape. It's following the rules of having 4 sides to our displacement. We can take this brush, copy it over, right click, and flip horizontally. This is just a quicker way to make the brush. Now I can copy it up again and rotate it 90 degrees. And I just need to do more editing to the vertexes to make them line up now. Copy this down and then flip it vertically, and then have these bottom vertexes aligned. We've essentially just created a displacement with a hole in the center. It consists of 4 separate displacements, but our end goal has been achieved. I'll unhide everything, and I can delete this brush. I'll select these and move them into place. We can now just shift drag this, and then shift drag it one more time so all 3 of our windows have a wall around them. The last step is to select all of them. I'll hide everything unselected, and I just want to use the vertex tool to make these meet. They now all meet up, and I just need to extend this a little bit more so it meets with the edge wall. Now I'll align all the textures together by clicking Treat as One, and I'll justify to top and left. This will make sure that the tiling is correctly set and we won't get a seam in between the displacements. The final window is over on the side here. I'll just grab this hole that I already have, rotate it, and put it into place. One thing you'll notice is that the vertex points all line up on this edge angle here. I'm only concerned about the vertexes that lie on the front face. What this means is that I don't care about this vertex since there's no face that's a displacement applied to it. Since my window is not in the hole, I can use the vertex tool to select all of these and then just nudge it over until it lines up. I can then grab these displacements, pull them over so it takes the old spot of that wall that was there. I'll pull this bottom vertex up and this one over. I just need one more displacement here to fill out the last wall. Creating one more brush. Create it with a displacement power of 3. And all the vertexes line up on the faces that have a displacement. Let's create a roof to this structure that's also a displacement. I'll copy this wall and then rotate it, and then stretch it so it would be the full size of the roof. I already know that this roof is going to have to be 2 separate displacements to properly sew. I'll use my auto groups on the right to select only displacements and then hide everything else in the level. I'll change the top texture to a roof texture, and we can get to aligning. When you enter the vertex manipulation mode, we have the end vertices and the mid vertices. The mid vertices are yellow. We can align displacements to the mid vertices and it will automatically work out how to sew those. We're gonna use this to our advantage when we create this displacement roof. I'll start by simply making a cut with the clipping tool to split the displacement in two. Now, with all of the vertex modes selected, I'm going to grab this vertex point here and move it so it aligns with the end vertex point on this wall. Now, these will sew together. This wall will also sew with the ceiling. Problems start to happen when we go to the front of our building. We have 4 points that we would need to sew to if we only use the end vertexes. 1 over here, 2, 3, 4. But if we count the endpoints as well, we have so many more options. We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 choices that we could potentially align to. I'll grab my roof displacement and select the vertex point here. I want to move this displacement point here on the roof to the end point between these two. So right there. Now these will sew together. The last issue that we need to work out is how to get these two to sew to this one. The midpoint is off a little bit, but we can just move the midpoint on the walls to get the sewing to work. So instead of readjusting the ceiling, I'll just readjust the wall vertex point to bump it over so it aligns with the midpoint of the ceiling displacement. With that in place, if we fix this little error that we've created down here, we'll select this entire displacement building, deselect the grass down here, and if we enable the DR setting up at the top, this will show us what vertexes are being removed when we're sewing. When I click sew with the DR enabled, we get these pink boxes here. These pink boxes are placed on the verts that are removed when we sew. It finds the distance between the two and averages it out so they sew perfectly. The last thing that I'd want to do is paint some alpha around these windows, so that way we get essentially the same effect that Inferno has. And that's a pretty good quick displacement building. Let's compile it so we can see what it looks like in game. When you compile, we'll see that we have a VViz has stopped working. We saw this before in the leak tutorial. This is one of the pitfalls of displacements. Due to how they work, they're not solid to the visibility engine. If we turn on only what the visibility engine cares about, which is removing entities, world details, and displacements, this is what visibility is currently seeing. From the rules that we learned in the quick optimization tutorial, we need to prevent any leaks from happening from the inside to the outside. We'll need to use some no-draw brushes to go ahead and seal this up quickly. With the leaks stopped, we can turn everything back on from our viz groups. There's 2 more displacement tools that can come quite in handy in certain situations. If we select our grass down here, we can check out the noise section. This will randomly add a minimum and maximum amount of value to any vert on the displacement. If I put in an obnoxious number, you can see what it does, but more realistically, you'd probably do 1 to 3, and that's about it. It's good for random variation. The last object is subdivision. This comes in handy when you're trying to do smoother objects. For instance, if we take this object here and quickly copy it, I'll return it to a world brush and recreate it having the top object. Now if I click subdivide, it will smooth out all the corners into this shape. You can kind of see what's happening, and it subdivides based on your current selection. It's useful in certain situations, but typically not in most levels. If you do end up using subdivide, it's usually with mountains or something, and you'll probably set the scale to 0.8. A few other displacement controls that you might find handy in certain situations is no physics collision. This disables physics objects from colliding with the displacement. You might use it for mud or snow. No Hall collision disables any player collision with the object. Ray collision will disable any ray cast colliding with the object. Gunfire and bullets will not collide with it. Let's go ahead and compile this so we can see what it looks like in game. With our game loaded, open the console and type map space in your map name, and then join a team. If we look over on the side, we have our displacement walls with the brick painting on them. Our displacement grass, again, with the painting on the side. I probably could have smoothed this out to make it look a little bit better, but now we know. We have our prop statics here to kind of hide this seam from the grass, and it looks pretty okay. Our windows that are on the inside there, those look pretty good as well. And up top, we have our roof. I hope you enjoyed learning how to create displacements in Hammer for your level. Thanks for watching, and join us again tomorrow for the next one.